Right. And we are rolling. Hello, everyone. We are back again with the very generous Jerry Marzinsky for giving us time again. Thank you so much for coming again.
You're welcome.
It's always fun to have you. I'm always stunned and I share so much of what you teach. So I appreciate you sharing it all with the world. I know it's probably keeping you very busy.
It is.
You were telling me, and tell everybody if you want to, where you just got back from, and the experience that you just had sounds really cool.
Yeah, I just got invited to Romania for all expenses trip there to paid to speak to a bunch of esoteric yogis, which was very interesting. They were very godly people. I mean, much more so than I ever thought. Very, very generous, very, very caring. I was taken care of better there than I am at home. So
Well, that's awesome.
it was an interesting experience. I spoke in front of 500 people or so,
Wow.
and did a number of videos.
So, do you notice the difference between a prison and there in the vibe?
Shoot, yeah, there's a massive difference.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing what, programming will do to a child and how people can get so far behind, and we have a lot to chat about when it comes to prisons. If you don't mind, just give anyone that has not been here before and heard you, just give them a little background about, you and what you do and who you are and all that good stuff.
Oh well, let me see where to start there. Um, I worked for 7 years in the biggest state hospital on the planet. There were like 10,000 people there when I got there. The whole time I was studying the schizophrenic voices. You know, what are they? Now, the psychiatric mafia says they're hallucinations. I found that that was totally wrong. They run very specific, repeatable, predictable patterns. Uh, and we just found a couple of guests, one who recorded them and another one who could see them. So
Wow.
I got them on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com for anybody who's interested in that. But what the psychiatric mafia and big pharma are telling you about the voices being hallucinations, it's dead wrong.
Mhm.
These things are entities. They're negative parasitic entities. They run the same patterns, and they're the same all over the planet. So they're running the same patterns at the big state hospital in Georgia that I used to work at as they did here in Arizona. And now that I'm working with people all over the world, it's the same patterns with people all over the planet.
Right,
So
right,
if they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations.
right.
So
And they were
after
nothing good. I remember you saying there was never a positive hallucination, they were always negative.
right, right, those are always negative. They're anti-religious. You know, they hate the 23rd Psalm. Um, that's, patients told me that when they repeat the 23rd Psalm, those voices react like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. So why would a hallucination do that? Why would a hallucination always be constantly negative? And why it's supposed to be random? A hallucination is supposed to be all over the place, positive, negative, everywhere in between. These aren't. These are consistently negative, and they're very nasty.
Mm.
Very, very vulgar.
Mhm.
Uh, and that they don't like anybody or anything, and it sounds like they don't even like themselves very much. But they are entities, and you can speak to them, and I have, and they can carry on a coherent conversation. And anybody who is around schizophrenics or works with them, you can see some time where they lapse into a conversation with these things, and
Mhm.
it's like one side of a telephone conversation where you can hear what they're saying, but you can't hear what the voice or the entity is saying. You know.
Did they ever translate for you?
Well, yeah. Yeah. Matter of fact, in the prison, I had groups of prisoners who worked with me who agreed to tell me in real time everything that the voices were saying.
Mhm.
So, and they were always in English. I've heard of voices appearing in another language, but that defeats their purpose. If the
Right.
person can't understand them, then they can't do what they're sent there to do, which is
So I
basically
never knew
destroy the
that one.
person.
That's interesting. Yeah, it is basically to destroy them, absolutely. And so you also worked in prisons as well. You worked in the mental institutions, but you also worked in prisons, and that's what fascinated me, and we talked about how we would touch base on that, this time. And
Yeah.
so, how many years did you work in prisons?
Well, I worked for 18 years in prisons, and that's where I had the group of inmates that would tell me in real time what the voices were telling them.
Oh, okay.
So
I was
I
thinking it
got
would be at the insane asylum, so I'm surprised at that.
no, no. What happened was the psychiatrists. They were very nervous when they found out I was asking the schizophrenics what their voices were saying. I got called into two of their offices and ordered to stop asking them questions because the voices don't like being asked about. You know, they don't want somebody digging into their business, so they upset the person. And when the psychiatrist found out I was doing that, I got called up on the red carpet and they ordered to stop. And the psychiatrist went, they are hallucinations. What you're doing is reinforcing them by asking the patients about them, and you're not ignoring them. No, I didn't ignore them because they're the root, they're the cause of schizophrenia. It's not
Sure.
some psychiatric mind brain disorder, chemical imbalance crap that Eli Lilly made up in the 60s when they came out with Prozac. It's a
Mhm.
complete lie. They knew it was a lie at the time,
Yeah.
and they stuck with it. And
Oh,
and
still are.
big, the psychiatric mafia are only drug dispensers for big pharma.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely. One of the things I love on your, I wrote it down on your website. It's the first thing that you see is that quote, and it says, "When an honest man discovers he's mistaken, he will either cease to be mistaken or cease to be honest."
yeah, that was Sherry put that up, and I
I
went, well,
love it.
yeah, you leave it there, you know. Uh,
It
so I agreed
defines what
with
you
it.
did. It defines what you did. You came out and you told the truth once you realized that you were, and you weren't really mistaken, you were just, groomed basically, to only, you're only allowed to see this much. We won't let you see the rest.
Well, they don't see it themselves, So the who was it? Carnegie and the Rockefellers took over the medical system back in what was it, 1930, I think it was, with the Flexner report. So basically, they paid off Congress to make a law that medical schools could only graduate doctors who took a pharmacological curriculum. So everybody else was what do they call them?
Like the
Uh,
naturopaths.
yeah, they treated them like a bunch of goofballs.
Mhm.
They don't know what they're doing. We're the only ones that know what we're doing. So they went with that, and that's where big pharma stepped in, and then they took control of the universities.
Right.
So they're putting out thousands of psychiatrists brainwashed to believe that the voices are hallucinations, and they're still doing it.
100%. 100%. And so when you started talking about prison, that's when I got interested because I was part of a group that started a charity to help, people out of youth prison. And so I got to see firsthand, the mess that is a prison, but also how people are in jail when really they should be getting help for their mental health. What percentage, or do you have some stats that you could just throw out, or do you want me to just say, okay, Jerry, what would you guess? Like, what percentage of the people do you think are there because they're actual true criminals? And then what percentage do you think actually have some spectrum of mental health issues?
Well, if you look at what the psychiatric mafia did, they got a diagnosis for virtually everything.
That's true.
The two kids that are fighting with each other is they got some diagnosis for that. If a wife loses her husband and is depressed for more than 2 months, she's got major depression. I mean, they cover everything. But the seriously mentally ill, there's a lot of them in there. What happened there is, I think it was back in the 70s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. The the bizarre state of California was charging their people so much taxes. The taxes were so heavy that there was a tax revolt, and the people came up with something called Proposition 19 and demanded that their property taxes be lowered. All right, so Arizona made up this bullcrap and went, oh well, well, Arizona went with it, but California went, well, we'll just release all these mentally ill from the state hospitals and put them in with a more normal population. That'll be good for them. No, most of these people couldn't work. So what are they going to do? They're going to steal. They're going to sell drugs. They're going to do drugs. They weren't capable of working. So they emptied out, and then it caught on across the country. It spread all across the country. So here they are trying to save money by throwing these guys out on the street. So the crime, the crime astronomically grew. And they wouldn't take their medicines even when they were in the state hospitals. These guys were so out of it, thinking that these chronically mentally ill are going to go out of their way to take those medicines. They hated those medicines. The psychiatrists keep their hands on them, so they have to prescribe them. They want control of those medicines. Those medicines aren't abusable. Nobody in their right mind would take those. Even people in their crazy mind won't take them. The side effects are so awful.
People in their crazy
Nobody
mind
wants
would
to
take
take
it.
them. But these psychiatrists are holding on. I mean, they got a death grip on the prescription for those things.
Sure.
And they're making, oh God, what was it, $34 billion a year, I think it was, on the sale of antipsychotic drugs. These are some of the most dangerous drugs that are prescribed by the medical profession. They rot out the person's brain with long-term use.
Yeah, it's so sad.
So what happened is all these guys ended up in prison.
Right.
For doing crazy stuff on the street, or attacking people, or selling drugs, or using drugs,
Suicide
or
even, right?
Yep, suicide,
Or a
assault.
suicide attempt. Yeah.
Yeah, assaults. All they don't send you to prison for suicide attempts, although it's illegal. That's interesting.
Right.
So it's like, but it's not illegal to be crazy.
hmm
So they have to do something to get in there. And some of them do it on purpose. They get out and they go commit a crime so they can get back in, because they can't survive on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I heard about that from the guys that I worked with. They're young kids and they were scared when they got out, because a lot of them went to jail when they were, 14, 15, 16. And then they came out as 18, 19, and they had to go get jobs and they had to go do things, and they had no skills at all. They didn't know where. And so some of them were like, well, I would rather just be in jail. Like they would literally say that.
Yeah.
Like it's a choice. I can choose to be taken care of at the state and then just sit and be in this harbor myself in the jail for the rest of your life. And so you're starting with like the bottom of like the barrel. But going back to what you were talking about, so there was a point in time where there were a lot of insane asylums, and then they all closed around the same decade, right?
Yeah. Yep. With Proposition 13, they closed and they dumped all those people out on the street.
Right.
So
And
that a lot of them ended up in prison. So the
right.
prison population, it went from, we've already got the U.S., as I was telling you earlier, the U.S. incarcerates more people per capita. Friggin' mosquito.
Get them. Talk about a
You wouldn't
parasite.
believe there'd be so many mosquitoes in Arizona.
Right? It's
But
kind of dry
there's a
there.
lot.
Well,
Yeah.
Bill Gates has been making them.
Yeah. Yeah, he's making them, and they're
He might have
ejecting us
sent
with.
some to you. You're being too
Yeah,
you're
he's
too
hitting
chatty.
Florida. From what I hear, he's hitting Florida.
Florida and Texas. And so yeah, during Reagan's time, it doubled the amount of people that were in jail which I thought was amazing because it was like something like 300,000, 365,000, I forget. And then by the time he was, leaving, it was close to 1 million. And now, do you know how many people are incarcerated in America?
Oh, golly, no. I probably should have looked that stuff up ahead of time.
Yeah,
But
no.
I tell you, like I said, they incarcerate more people per capita than any other country in the world.
Right.
That's not a good statistic for people. You
No,
know,
it's horrible. I've heard so many crazy stories too. I've heard of people who were invited to dinner parties to talk about investing in prisons, private prisons, and I mean, think about that. They're literally trying to use rappers to glorify drugs and crime so that they can fill up their prisons.
yeah,
It's
and
nuts.
what they do is they go to the legislatures and they say, uh, on top of a nice healthy bonus we can incarcerate these people for much less than the state does.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, it's
and
still
they do,
expensive.
but they don't offer any rehabilitation whatsoever. It's just a human holding tank. They run it as cheaply as they can. There's no programs. There's no nothing from the ones I saw.
So what were you doing then? Just handling, like, putting out fires?
Well, with the private prison, I knew one of the wardens there.
Mhm.
So he was a progressive warden, and he wanted to set up some of the programs I'd developed.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but they wouldn't even fund the minimum for the material that he needed,
Right.
to get the thing running. So those private prisons they're bullcrap. They it's all about money. At
100%.
least at least the state and federal prisons have some rehabilitation. I mean,
Mhm.
in the state prisons, from what I saw, it's gone way down, especially here in Arizona. When I started off at the beginning of my 18-year stint there, they had auto mechanics, they had um, gardens where the inmates went out in gardens, they had work crews to go work on the roads. Um, they had different skills. They had, uh, community college involved there. And then as time went on, and the population just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. So they had to double bunk these guys, and they put two guys in a room designed for one. Then they had big dormitory rooms that they used. Um, but the rehabilitation aspect just kept going down, 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 and down. Until these people they had nothing to do. So they got into fights with one another, and so trying to get them some rehabilitation there. My wife's a computer programmer, so it took us several years to develop a computer program, a computer assisted program that would administer uh, different programs. Um, Alcohol education, drug education, parenting, all those different kind of programs.
Sure.
So we came up with booklets that the prisoners could take back to their room, and we started administering them, and they cheated on everything. Everything. They had all these ingenious ways to cheat. They'd write the answers on their hands. They'd do hand signals with one another. They'd put the answers inside of a clear pen. Uh, the cheating was just incredible, and to keep up with that was a real pain in the butt.
Right.
So, and also the grading of the test was a pain in the butt. Took a lot of time.
Yeah.
So, uh, what I did is I started developing a computer program that where we give them the booklets to take back to their cells
Mhm.
and study in their cells, so they have something productive to do. So the cell is really their classroom.
Right.
Then they come back once a week, and it took years to develop the software for this. But what the computer would do is we had to have it administer the questions randomly,
Mhm.
and
Otherwise, they'd figure out what the code
they'd,
was.
they'd figure out what it was. And then we had to have the computer also randomly mix up the questions so they couldn't cheat. And then we had to come up with an encrypted password that they couldn't break in because some of them were computer savvy.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and, and this took like 3 years. I mean, it was just step by step. Finally, we had it. So we have a room of like 8 computers or 7 computers, and we had an inmate clerk who would collect the books. So when they were done taking a test over one section, they would turn in their booklet and they'd be given the next one.
Right.
So then they could come back next week and just take the test on the computer.
Right.
But what the counselor who the prison counselor had to do would to be start up all the computers and be in the room when they were being run.
Right.
They were too sorry to do that. They turned over the encrypted password to the inmate,
Oh my gosh.
the inmate trustee, and he broke in and he turned it into a store. So we were, this was probably the best program that the Arizona prison system ever had. It was
Mhm.
the cheapest, it was the most efficient, it was the most effective, it was measurable,
And they
and
couldn't
it
even
took
have somebody oversee it
they
properly.
couldn't even have somebody oversee it. So,
So
and I
this
found
isn't
out,
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was
yeah,
gonna
so I
say it
found out
reminded me
that
of
that wasn't the only case in our prison. So in our prison, I would go to the warden. I said, look what you can't have this happen. You're turning a program that has a very high volume and is being run legitimately. When run legitimately, is doing a lot of good.
Sure.
But you allow these inmates to take control of it, then it becomes it's reinforcing criminal behavior at
Mhm.
an intense level, at a large level.
Mhm.
So these wardens, they stopped it, and they didn't like it, but they stopped it. But then I found out the other prisons and others in other places in the state where I set these things up, the counselors were doing the same thing.
Mhm.
They turned it over to an inmate trustee, and the inmate trustee was selling the answers for a store, candy, cigarettes, whatever you could get from these other inmates. Yeah, I'll give you the answers. You owe me 2 packs of cigarettes or something
Right.
like that. So it was just this criminal.
It was
Uh,
power.
yeah. So I
Wow.
went to when I found out that this was happening in other places, I said, I went to Phoenix where the head of the substance abuse programs for the state prison was there. And I said, this is what's happening. And it's happening in all these prisons. I've seen it with my own eyes. You need to stop this. You're turning one of the best programs you've ever had, the most productive, the most measurable, the cheapest, the most efficient, and allowing them to turn it into a criminal enterprise. And she looks at me and she goes, no, you don't tell us what to do. We tell you what to do.
Oh, lovely.
I looked at her and I said, not in this case, lady. The software is copyrighted in my wife's name. You're using it by her good graces. You either run
Mhm.
these things right or you shut them down. You
Right.
know what she did? She shut down $10,000 worth of computers, just shut them down.
Wow.
That's the kind of people you have to deal with in these places.
Well, and
Not
so
all
that
of them are like that.
yeah, but that goes back to one of the most shocking things that I learned from working with these young men. I mean, they were in the highest security Texas prison for youth. They could get Burger King, they could get porn, they could have sex, they could do all kinds of things. Why? Because of the guards. And I just was stunned when I found that out. I mean, this is a youth prison. Like, they shouldn't be doing any of those things
Yeah.
in at all, you know? I mean, they shouldn't be allowed in a regular prison either. And so then it comes back to I really wanted to ask you this first. What is it about having power over another person like that that starts perverting and twisting the minds of the people who are actually the ones who are supposed to be responsible and, you know, making sure the rules are there, but not being shady or abusive? What makes people go abusive in those positions? It happens all the time.
Well, for one, they kind of recruit those kind of people.
Oh, that
I
makes sense.
remember one recruiting sign for Arizona was, you know, this could be you, and here's a woman standing there with a shotgun over all these men. It appeals to a certain kind of people.
Got it.
We can give you the power, kind of thing. And not all of them are. There were a lot of good people in there,
Oh,
but
yeah, I'm not saying all of them, but
no. no,
but
there
it
were there
was
was a
very accessible.
yeah, and there's one fella he was a professor at the University of Arizona. He wrote Crossing the Yard, and it told of his experiences while he worked as a volunteer at the prison. He watched guards haul in cocaine, smuggle stuff up. There's a lot of money, so there's a constant conflict between uh, the rules and the inmate population. And the inmate population is always trying to take over the running of the prison. So, like in your case, you know, they got the porn, they got the McDonald's, they got the this kind
Mhm.
of stuff, and it takes a staunch warden and a lot of good staff to stop that kind of stuff from happening. I mean, you have to have people with some integrity, and a lot of the people I saw were lazy. They were just, you know, a lot of they could do virtually nothing and get away with it.
Right.
Um, and then there was this kind of tyrannical uh, within the administration. I had much more trouble with the administration than I did with the prisoners by a long shot. And it's like a tyrannical administration. We'll do it this way, and they don't realize the consequences of what they're doing a lot of the times. Um,
It's like they're power hungry.
well, they have to have a certain amount of power to control the prison.
Of course.
And there are prisons that are they're taken over by the inmates.
Oh,
So
I
they
believe
get the
it.
guards. Well, we'll behave ourselves, and especially the gangsters. I mean, so there's constant tension between the staffs. As they try to run those things. I remember, one case I was working wasn't quite a maximum security prison, but was like a heavy medium security prison.
Mhm.
So here's three tiers of or two tiers of cells, and my psychology office was right next to one of these cell blocks,
Right.
and I was watching what happened. It was like they had this little small guy who was a black belt in karate, and he was an arrogant little sob, and he would treat the inmates like crap. And then what he did is he'd bring over his fellow hard butts, like, oh, hey, come work with me. I mean, we're controlling this we got control of this cell block kind of thing. And what he would do is they'd stir him up all day. You know,
Man.
they challenge. I get this guy looked like to me like he really wanted to get in a fight with one. You know, the and there's serious repercussions if you strike a guard.
Mhm.
Um, and he's kind of egging them on. Not only will you get in trouble, but I'll kick your butt. Maybe you never know.
Right?
And so he is stirring these guys up all day, and then he brings in the other hard butt staff, and they're stirring them up all day. And then at night, these two really mellow guys came on who had a good sense of humor, and they were like jokers. They would joke with the
Yeah, way
inmates,
more
and
fun.
way more fun, and kind of uh, they were much more human and funny, and they'd kind of break up all the tension from the day. So here's this entire building that was like breathing. I mean, all day the tension was built, and then at night these guys would come in and they would release it. So it was like
Aw.
going back and forth, back and forth. But these hard butts during the day were not doing any of the paperwork they should have done. So uh, the guys at night are saying, "Hey, we can't get our regular work done and have to do all the paperwork from the time also." So they got a female guard who was working two jobs and had kids, and she kept falling asleep in the control room. And then when they wake her up, she denied that she'd been asleep. Oh no, I wasn't sleeping. Oh yeah, kind of. And so
Sounds
what they
like
did,
Jeffrey Epstein's, jail.
so what they did one night is they wrapped her in toilet paper in the control room. So here's like, a couple hundred inmates could see this happening in the control room. They thought it was funny. So here she is. She's asleep in this chair wrapped in toilet paper.
She can't deny it now.
Yeah, that's what they were figuring. And one of the lieutenants walks in at night, and he sees this, and he went psychotic on him. He broke them up. He didn't let them work together ever again,
Mhm.
and shipped them to different units. And I'm watching this hard guy come in every night or every day, and just whip these guys up, and there's no release at night.
Right.
So I went to the captain of the unit, and I said, Captain, you can't take these guys out of there. You don't understand what's going on there. If you take them out, this place is going to blow apart. Get out of here, psych. You're just an inmate lover kind of thing, And I'm like, wait, Captain,
They called you psych?
you don't. Yeah, they call me the psych, inmate lover. The psychs were inmate lovers.
You inmate lover.
And I said, Captain, listen, it's not going to be good if you take those guys out of there. This is what happens at night, during the daytime. This little hard guy whips them all up. These guys were breaking it up. Yeah, I gotta get out of here, So, okay, I did my best. 2 weeks later, that place exploded. And
You
what
warned them.
happened? I warned them. And what had happened was one inmate stole an orange out of the kitchen. And one of these hard ass guards confronted him and said, "Hey, you stole that orange. Give it to me." Now the mistake he made is there was a number of cells open on the bottom floor. Okay, and the inmate took the orange and he threw it at him.
Oh gosh.
And then the guard went to get at the inmate, and they began to fight. And then all these other ones came out, and they were rip roaring mad anyway. So that guy barely escaped with his life. And then they started attacking the control room. Now that bulletproof glass will stop a bullet, but it won't stop a brick.
Oh.
So they broke into the control room. They took over the control room. They almost had a guard. They had him by the leg. They were pulling him back. He just barely got out.
That's like
Then
a
they
movie.
Yeah, it's like a movie. Then they destroyed everything in that place that could be destroyed. The sexual offenders. See, when they smashed the control panel, so they got into the control room, they smashed the control panel, broke everything in there. They burnt everything that would burn. They threw mattresses out on the floor. It was a mess. It was they smashed out everything. They threw the washing machines off the tiers. It was just like a hurricane that hit the place.
It's like
And
war.
then they were trying to get at the sex offenders so they could kill them. They wanted to kill them. So they were throwing lit paper under their doors, trying to burn them out.
Dang.
And it was $1 million worth of damage. I'd got out of there 45 minutes before that happened.
Wow.
And then I watched the newspapers, what they said in the newspapers. They
Was it
they said inmates went crazy over an orange. That was the
man?
story that came out in the press.
Yeah.
And none of the staff were allowed to say the truth to anybody. If they found you told the newspapers what really happened, they'd fire you.
Right. Oh my gosh, it's just so crazy to me because that's part of the problem with the whole the way it all began is that they were having the same problem in the mental institutions. So the guards were like abusing these people, and it ended up being a huge problem. And that was one of the main reasons, at least, that they used to cite that's why they shut them down. There was just nothing good coming out of it.
No, they shut them. Well, there's nothing good coming out of it because all they're doing was drugging these people.
Oh, well, that's probably
So
true
these
too.
psychotropic drugs were discovered by the Germans and then refined by the
What if
French.
they were testing them, testing the
Well,
drugs on them?
they tested them over here. So back then when they came out, I don't know where it was. It was like the Germans were using them in World War II. The Nazis were using them, so they came out before probably in the early 40s or late 30s, and they were discovered in a dye lab in Germany.
Oh.
So these dyes that they were using to dye clothes, the workers were getting all zonked out, and the French took that and they synthesized it into a drug. and they would
Wow.
use it as a painkiller for operations and that kind of stuff. And then somebody got the great idea that, hey, let's see what this will do with a crazy population. But the Freudians controlled things at that time. They wouldn't let them use it in the Europeans in the European hospital, so they brought it over to the United States. Now, at this time, there was a battle going on between the psychiatrists and the neurologists for who's going to have the dominant position in this field. And the
Wow, I never knew
psychiatrists,
that.
yeah, the psychiatrists were losing badly because nothing they did was working. At least the neurologists, they were doing some kind of good, but the psychiatrists were like the stepchilds. Their Freudian stuff was too expensive. It didn't work well. Boy, I got the sun coming in on my face here.
I know. It's interesting. You look like part of you's disappearing, like one of the entities that you
It's the
talk
sun
about.
coming, the
Only it
sun
looks like
coming
a
in the
nice
window.
entity, not a bad one.
Yeah, the sun is setting out here now.
Yeah.
So what the psychiatrists saw that they could drug up an entire population and sedate them, they latched onto those drugs, and that was their
That
savior.
was their power.
That was their powers, was those drugs. And even today, they don't like regular general practitioners using those things.
Right.
They got them convinced that they're the only specialists that know how to use these things. And in reality,
It's not even hard science.
no, no. They got everybody convinced that, uh, psychosis is a biochemical imbalance. You know, has anybody ever seen these guys give any lab tests to a patient to see what's out of balance or by how much?
Right.
There's like 23 neurotransmitters or something like that in the brain. You'd think if there's a biochemical imbalance in the brain causing these mental illnesses,
You
that there should be some kind of test they give them to find out what the baseline is.
some
Where
proof
are
of
you
it.
at now?
Yeah.
No,
Y
they don't exist. This is all made up by the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. This biochemical imbalance thing.
This is
And
why I love you, Jerry. You speak the truth.
yeah, and they're still pushing it. I mean, I pulled up an advertisement not too long ago. I got it in the stack of papers here somewhere where they're advertising. See, what they did is changed it though. They, instead of saying it is, they're saying it is believed or experts
Yeah,
believes
yeah,
that.
yeah.
This bull crap. To lead people on.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, almost every medical study I read has some wording that if you really, really look at it, it looks like it says suggest this, or there's always that one word that I'm just kind of like, it's legalism, It's just wild. I just put this up because this lovely lady, Courtney Walsh, said, great topic. Enjoy Jerry's perspective. If you think about it, we are all in mental cages of one sort or another. Jerry's wisdom is very valuable, and you're a great interviewer. She had also asked earlier, where is it? She had asked a question. Where did it go? Oh, I guess about the mental cages. And so, how would you compare somebody who is a criminal to somebody who has some sort of mental imbalance, um, and where you would put them? Like, how would you do it? Because obviously this isn't working.
No, the drugs aren't working. They they have their place with psychotics, schizophrenics that are uncontrollable.
Right.
That they're past the point where they want any help. So these voices that they hear sound just like the voices you hear in your head right now.
Mhm.
Only they say different things. They
Right.
sound like the thousands of other thoughts you have going through your head. So the prisoners, uh, a lot of them believe that those voices are who they are. Because we're taught as kids, from the time you're a kid, it's like every thought you have going through your head belongs to you. That's far from true. You know, Emanuel Swedenborg, the Christian mystic, says none of your thoughts belong to you. You're the chooser. You choose which ones you want to pay attention to. And
Do you agree with that?
unfortunately, Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah. So at some level, especially the negative thoughts. I mean, you can. There's not one person in that prison who hasn't done what normal people have thought about doing. The only difference is they acted on it.
Sure.
You know. So what they are is they're like the subconscious of society. You know, everybody has those negative thoughts. They don't like them. They're afraid of them. But these guys actually acted on them, and they get thrown away. And you don't see anybody going in there. They won't let anybody in. If a legislator came through there, he was surrounded by a crowd of wardens, administrators. They wouldn't let him talk to the prisoners. And any prisoner who talked to them and said anything wrong would there'd be hell to pay.
Sure.
So it's a sealed off society where nobody can really see what's going on in there except the people who work there, and they're
Which
not
is
allowed to
so
talk about it.
dangerous when you think about it. It's so dangerous. And
Yeah.
so in just your opinion, I'm not looking for stats. We're not holding you to this, but in the prison that you worked in, what percentage of those guys that were there were actually mentally way far off that shouldn't have been in a prison?
Well, that shouldn't have been in a prison.
Yeah, like they
Well,
should have been
they're
getting mental health help
well.
somewhere else
You
or
look you look at what the mental health system is in the United States. It's the psychiatric mafia drugging people. These regular therapies that they have, that they're teaching in school, they don't work. I've had what have they 8 years, 4 years of undergraduate and 4 years of graduate school, and they're teaching these therapies. They don't work. Now some of these new energetic therapies that are coming out, like the mace energy method that I trained in under there, it works. I mean, these psychological problems are gone, and they're gone in like an hour. It actually works. They don't want that. So the people who came up with the mace energy method took it to where'd they take it first? They took it to the universities and they showed them. They demonstrated on the staff there. Look, it works. Here, we'll show you. We'll give you some sessions. They said, you give us the patent, we'll consider it. So they said,
Wow.
screw you. We're not going to give you the patent. You probably will bury it anyway. So they went up to the legislature and then they showed the legislature, hey, we should be using this in the prisons and social service areas. They blew it off. You know, and you look at to answer your question, that I'd say probably 20 to 25% of the prison population are seriously mentally ill. That's like bipolar, uh, some form of schizophrenia, or some other serious mentally ill case. Uh, but the rest of them run the gamut. I mean, um, and there's a number of them that could be helped by these therapies, even if they had some trained therapists in the prison. And
Right.
what I found is that they went from kind of when I started off, letting us kind of do what we felt needed to be done, to as the population increased, they wanted to cover their butts with more and more paperwork, to make it look like, oh yeah, we're doing something here. You know, so here's all these forms, all these records, all these kind of things. Um, here was another case where uh, I had one really psychotic prisoner on this unit, and he wasn't medicated. So what they would do, they drug the ones who were causing problems, and the ones who weren't causing problems but were just crazy, they would leave them be. So they
Wow.
didn't want to pay those drugs are expensive.
Mhm.
They're really expensive, and I think it would take probably $700-800 a month to keep somebody
Sure.
sane here in the United States on Risperdal or one of the major antipsychotics.
Sure.
Uh, and you can only get them by prescription from the psychiatric mafia. So you have to pay for an office visit from those bozos, and then you have to go to the pharmacy, pay the pharmacist, and then buy this $700-800 medicine. You can go across the border. It's 60 miles south of here, across the border into Mexico. You can get those same drugs
Mhm.
that cost $700-800 here in the U.S. over the counter in Mexico for $75. If you need to see a psychiatrist, you can go see him, and he'll go, "Well, I think you ought to try this one to start with." He'll prescribe it, you know, and you go in there and you get it. If it works, you don't ever have to go see him again. You just go to the pharmacy and you get that stuff. It's not abusable medicine. Nobody wants it. It's awful. It has awful side effects. That's
Yeah.
why nobody stays on it.
And so
You know?
that's why it kinda knocks out the ones that are starting trouble. And so they basically put them in like a chemical straitjacket then.
Well, that's what these psychiatric medications are. They're chemical straitjackets. So instead of, you know, when I got into Central State Hospital, those drugs were already there, but there were attendants there that still remembered when they had to fight these violent patients, and schizophrenic patients are supernaturally strong. You know, they're amazing.
The
They
entities are strong.
yeah, yeah, they get that strength from somewhere that's not human strength. You know, so they would only drug the ones that are causing problems. And then they got to the point, this one supervisor we had, he was brown nosing the administration, and one of the psychiatrists. So what he would do is he'd have us do the work for the psychiatrist, spot the guys that were causing a lot of trouble, and then refer them to the psychiatrist. You know, so the psychiatrist had another job, and he would come and just see whoever he had to see. You know, kind of. So they worked something out between them, some kind of deal. And then the psychiatrist was under fire for using uh, too much psychiatric medication. Right. One of them got in trouble for it, and they threatened to fire him because he was practicing psychiatry as he always had, and they gave him a very low rating, and just really dirtied up his record, saying you're giving out way too many drugs. I mean, these are non-medical people, the administration saying that. So I'm like, I can't believe what he showed me what they wrote him. It was
Is
like,
it the private prison just not wanting to pay for it?
well, this was a state prison. This was the state prison, and the private prison is going to be even worse. So, uh, what this our psychology supervisor at the time did is he sent a stooge up to the medical unit. So the rest of us people working psych would send psychotic patients who were out of control to the medical unit. They'd be evaluated by the psychiatrist there, put on drugs, and then sent back. Okay, and then from then on, they would get their drugs in the unit. So what this guy did, he's despicable. He's working his way up the line. He wants to advance, so he's brown nosing, and he needs to cut back on the meds because the psychiatrist is being blamed for using too much medicine, and we're the ones referring the these crazy people and to the psychiatrist,
Sure.
to the medical unit. So he gets his stooge and he puts his psychologist in there, and his job is to re-diagnose everybody that we sent in there and send them back to the
And
unit.
say, "Oh, they're just fine."
They're just fine. So there was this one guy in the unit I was in. I was keeping track of his voices, and they were getting more and more violent. This guy was losing more and more control. So I sent him over to the medical unit. Said, "These are the symptoms. He's threatening this other inmate. He's getting increasingly upset and violent. He needs to be drugged. You need to do something. He's going to hurt somebody." So the stooge turns him back and said, "Oh no, he's just a antisocial personality disorder." So I put another thing in there, a full page. These are the symptoms. These are all the bad things that this guy's going to hurt somebody. This is what he's doing. That's building up. He's losing more and more control. I sent him back again. The stooge sends him back again, saying it's a uh, antisocial personality disorder. So I send him back a third time with 2 pages worth of information. Okay, they send him back again. 2 weeks later, he stabbed another inmate 13 times. And I was so mad that I could not go to work that day because I was afraid I'd beat the shit out of the chief psychologist. I
That would be
couldn't.
quite a headline.
Yeah, I would have been fired. I mean, but I didn't
Wow.
trust myself not to be able to walk into his
Be
office and
so
just
mad.
knock the crap out of him. Boy, I would have loved to do that.
Well, and I was thinking about that too. Do they actually put so they know who is the 25%? Let's say that there's a fourth of these guys that are very dangerous and unpredictable and or drugged out and then they're fine. Do they let them go with the regular population or do they kind of keep them together? You know what I'm saying?
Well, they pretty much keep them together. They have a. Um, I think they have certain units where the most dangerous go and are isolated. But yeah, they're in with the regular population. So
So like somebody's kid does something wrong, ends up in jail for a little bit, they could have a roommate that's literally
psychotic.
psychotic.
Yeah, there was one time where I was the psych for the jail for the prison. Okay, and that's where the worst of the worst from the entire prison went. And I walked into my office one day, and here was a note from one of the prisoners saying they my roommate's crazy. He's pacing his cell all night. He's talking to himself. He's out of it. He's scary. Yeah, I caught him standing over me at 3 in the morning, staring down at me, and I don't know what he was thinking.
That'd be so
So he said,
scary.
I can't deal with this. So at that same time, I got a call from the captain of the unit saying, you got to come over here and do something with this, this crazy guy, this cell that we have these people into. It's not working out real well. So I look up the sane fella in that cell and see what he's in there for. He was in there for snitching off the what is it, the Aryan Brotherhood, which is a
Uh,
gang. It's a nasty gang in the prison. He snitched off one of their drug deals,
mm,
and they stabbed him, and he was in there for um, protective custody. So he was totally sane, you know, trying to do a good thing, and they wanted him dead. They wanted him so dead so bad that some of them got in trouble to get into the jail there, so they could get a shot at him.
wow.
So here he is with this psychotic guy, and here's these gangsters throwing notes under his door saying, "We're here. We're waiting for you. We're just waiting for a chance to get you."
Man.
So this was a breakthrough for me because what I thought is that uh, what what there was an energy drop with the psychotic voices. When they attacked, the person's energy was just drained, and it was consistent. There's a one-to-one correlation between the voices attacking the person and their energy disappearing. And when I ran into this case, I called the sane guy up first and watched him come up the staircase. He had plenty of energy. He didn't have to use the guardrail. He a brisk walk over to the control room
Sure.
where the interview office was, sat down, and he was nervous. I mean, sure, you're under those circumstances with a lunatic in your this small cell, and there's nowhere to go.
Right.
You know, and the gangsters had tried to pay the crazy guy off to hurt this guy also. I don't know if he knew that or not. Um, so I talked to him, and he goes, this guy's out of it. He's standing over me, staring at me at 3 in the morning, and he's totally three sheets to the wind. He's crazy. He said, you got to get me out of there. I said, well, I'll do what I can do. But, we might be
Sure.
able to drug him or whatever. I'll report it, but I don't have the power to move you. That's not within my purview. So I let him go, and then I called up the crazy guy and watched him come up the steps. And he could barely make it up the steps, just very slow. He used a guardrail. He kind of shuffled over to the office, sat down, and then it was like, in the chair, no energy. And I asked him, "You hearing voices?" He said, "Yeah, I hear them all the time." I said, "Are they strong?" He said, "Yeah, they're really strong."
Man.
And I asked him, do they drain your energy? He said, "Yeah, they got me drained all the time." And you know, after I saw that, what I was thinking was that the energy was drained because these guys were so the voices are so nasty. They're very nasty. And if you were having to listen to that 24 hours a day, you'd think that would be draining. But in this case, I've watched these two. I mean, it was a perfect experimental situation. Um, they had the same cell, they had the same beds, they had the same food, they had the same guards. I mean, you couldn't set up a more perfect experimental situation. And after I saw the two of them, I went, it's not due to the anxiety. There's
Right.
something else that is taking away their energy. Um, I was pretty sure it was the voices, although I wasn't completely positive what the voices were. Uh, but that that changed my mind right there. Um, so you may have that, that guy, uh, the normal guy was stuck with this raving maniac
Oh, it's horrible.
in there. So they're stuck with cellmates that way. Um,
And so really what you're saying is it didn't just affect the energy of the guy that had the voices, it also affected the energy of the person that was in the room with him.
yeah, to some degree, although the normal guy had a whole lot more energy than he
Sure.
did. And that's what happens in families too. You have a
I was just
schizophrenic.
gonna say that.
Yep,
Yeah.
you have a schizophrenic in the family. He affects the whole family. The whole family gets drained. You know,
Well, and that's
but
why it's so important to get the deliverance from this, and it's what the work that you're doing is really amazing, and there's a lot of people that had asked about, the MACE. Is it MACE or MAZE?
no, it's MACE, the Mace Energy Method.
Okay.
You know,
I'm gonna
so I've been using that for more than 2 years now, and it works better than anything I've ever seen. It actually works. They ought to be using that in all the prisons.
yeah.
You know,
Well, I mean,
but
and all the families that have somebody like this, I mean, if they can find somebody like you that can help them with the MACE energy method rather than going down the crazy pharma route, and it's really a merry-go-round. Do you find
yeah,
that with the MACE energy method, there is, like, a point where you have to redeliver it, or is
no.
it
Once
wow,
it's done, it's done.
that's so
Once
cool.
once that the problem is, somebody feels they're worthless. I mean, in an hour, that's gone. They struggled with it all their life. I mean, it's
Wow.
pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah,
But
you'd think
this
somebody like Dr. Amen or somebody that's doing all the brain scans, they would want to collaborate with somebody like Mace.
yeah, there's other energetic therapies coming out also. So it looks like there's a small segment of the um, psychotherapy population moving in that direction. There's also a group of what they call them spirit releasers
Mhm.
who they charge a lot of money, but they can get rid of the voices
Yeah, it's like
because
deliverance.
well, you kind of like they kind of talk them out into the light.
Sure.
So if you can talk one into the light, they're gone for good.
Oh, that's so
But
cool.
there's a lot of them don't want to go. They don't trust anybody, and especially the higher up ones. So there's different levels
Mhm.
of these entities there.
Yeah.
Um,
And so I have a question, like, so you know how some people trauma triggers their DID. Do they know what triggers schizophrenics
well,
or if
the,
something does?
it's well, what brings it on is usually meth is one. I mean,
Okay.
meth. I've seen more
That's
prisoners
right.
in the prison with meth than any other drug. So when you talk about part of I mean, they become as psychotic as anybody in the state hospital. So what happens with them? They start using meth. They feel like they're supermen. They feel great. They have a lot of energy. They stay up for get all kinds of stuff done, and it feels wonderful until they crash. Okay? And then they start hearing voices when they're up, and they go, "Oh, that's just a hallucination." They go, "Okay, well, they ignore it." and then when they come down, it goes away, and then that happens several more times. It may happen for a few months, and then one day they don't go away, and they're just as psychotic as anybody else, and they're permanently. The prison is full of these kind of people. So that's why I say 20 to 25%, because you have all these meth addicts flowing in
Sure.
there from all the
Wow.
meth being brought across the border. It's easy to get it. And then you
Mhm.
have the psychiatric mafia prescribing. I've seen a number of prisoners who, their kids are bouncing off the wall like kids do, and the psychiatric mafia fills them full of Ritalin or Adderall, which is an amphetamine. And I asked them, I said, "What, did it work for you?" "Oh yeah, it worked for me. I could concentrate. It calmed me down." And I'd ask them, "Well, if it was working well for you, then why did you keep increasing it? Why did you keep going out into the street and buying more and more meth?" And their answer was, "I don't know."
Yep.
And
Well,
then
the
they end
brain
up in prison.
adjusts, just like
Yeah, I
it
don't
does
know
with
if I,
alcohol, I would imagine.
yeah,
I'm guessing.
I don't know if there's a tolerance effect with meth. I've never heard them talk about it,
Oh, okay.
but a
Sounds
lot of
like
them are in there for drugs. So they can't get any psychological help out on the streets.
right.
That you go to these mental health centers and they're overwhelmed. They have these young counselors who don't know what they're doing, um, and they just burn them out. They pay them little, they burn them out. So what they set up is the psychiatric mafia and big pharma have these private hospitals now that are just merry-go-rounds. And the prison is too. There's like
Mhm.
a 70% recidivism rate
It's so
for
high.
prisoners within
And
3 years.
so expensive. I mean, I remember, and this was years ago, when we were looking at the stats, it was anywhere from 30 to $100,000 a year per prisoner. It seems to me to be a lot cheaper to get the MACE method going for everybody.
Well, yeah, it would. Although it's not a high volume method. I only see 2 people a day, and that's all I could deal with. That's it, because it does take it out of you. Um,
Sure.
and I'm supposed to be retired, but it's not high volume. But you look at the recidivism rate. V.F. Skinner, like what, 80 years ago or something like that, he proved that punishment doesn't work. But what it does is suppress behavior while the stimulus, while somebody's standing over them with a baseball bat,
Right.
it'll suppress the behavior. But if that whatever's standing over them, if that influence is removed, that bad behavior shoots up above baseline, back and then back down to where it was to start with. So punishment doesn't work. There's a lot of those prisoners in there. They need to be in there.
Oh,
You know,
100%.
they
Yeah.
they can't function in society. And I've watched them leave some of the really psychotic ones out because they've done their time. I mean, there's
Mhm.
one guy I knew he'd kill somebody within 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
And they give him $50 and turn him loose on the street. Said, "Okay, you're free." What's that guy going to do? He doesn't have $50. What's that? That won't even pay for a hotel for a night.
It's
What's he
food.
going to do?
Food and a prayer. And are any of them, like, getting involved in, you know, biblical things? Because I know there's a lot of ministries that go into prisons. Because I mean, we did. Ours was a 501(c)(3), not a ministry, but you know what I'm asking.
Yeah. So what they had in our prison were a group of fire breathing fundamentalists.
Yeah, that's
And
not gonna work.
that doesn't work real well. So I was in charge of volunteer services for a while, and I would let I'd let the Mormons in, I'd let the Hare Krishnas in, I'd let the meditators in, the Buddhists. I mean, anybody like that. And then these fire breathing preachers went to the warden and said, "Hey, look, we don't like what he's doing. He's letting in all these heathens, you know, and
You pagan helper.
yeah, we want him out of there." So the warden pulled me out. I said, "Well, listen, you got all these fire breathing guys. A lot of these prisoners don't want it, don't want that crap. They don't
Right,
want that stuff thrown in their face.
right,
Everybody has their own level that, so."
right.
you increase the number so the prisoners will migrate to the level they're at, instead of the only choice they have are these fire breathing, you're going to burn in hell preachers, you know, and
I get some of those people writing comments on my channel. It's not fun. And so, gosh, it's just, to me, it's like a whole other world. And then you had sent me that article about how they're just building bigger and bigger prisons. Like there's some $1 billion prison that you sent me that article about.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, the prisons are packed. They're packed. They're which increases the stress on staff, and like you were saying, it's much more expensive to keep these guys in prison than it was to keep them in a mental hospital, because they have all the security, all the guards, all the, all the extra attention you have to pay to them, where the mental
Mhm.
patients, you just kind of let them run around on the ward and do their thing, and they babble to one another, and make friendships, and
Yeah,
they didn't require, unless somebody went off and was hurting somebody else,
sure.
they didn't require that kind of security, that kind of control,
Mhm.
and then if the ones that were really bad, they just drug them until they were drooling. So, but so they shot themselves in the foot by getting rid of the state hospitals,
Mhm.
where it was much cheaper to deal with these guys than it is in prison.
Yeah, except for
So
the private jails probably, or the private prisons probably wanted to make the money. It was probably one of the things that they wanted to do. I mean, I'm sure this was an intentional thing, the more I look at it. Do you agree?
what, the private prisons?
Just to keep people, yeah, they're making it is an enterprise.
It
It's
is an
not
enterprise.
yeah, okay.
It's that's exactly what it is. There's no rehabilitation programs that I saw there. They
Mhm.
weren't really trying to help the guys. They were just, it was a human holding tank.
Sure.
They spent as little money on anything as they possibly could. The wardens got paid very well. They got cars and they got a big salary. Everybody else was paid crap. So a lot of the guards from the private prison would go back to the state prison. So they had a bunch of newbies all the time that didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have any experienced people. And the turnover in the rate in the prison is horrendous also, because
Sure.
they treat their staff like the prisoners. It's like it was the only place that I've ever worked where nobody wanted to be there, you know, except maybe a couple of the wardens. That was it. But nobody else, the prisoners didn't want to be there. The staff didn't want to be there. Nobody wanted to be there.
Nobody wants to
You
be
know,
there. Nobody wants the drugs. There's gotta be a better way. And so do you see that there is a better way that would be less expensive, even if that entailed still having prisons or still having, mental institutions? Like, if you if it was Jerry's world, how would you establish, and what would you do?
well, that's a tough question because it requires a lot of money no matter what you do. And then you have to have the support of the legislature. They don't want to give the prisons any money. And they were corrupt. I mean, they lost a freaking bulldozer, an entire bulldozer
Just
disappeared.
missing.
They had correctional industries where they had these prisoners working for 25, 50 cents an hour for this corporation, and they were losing the money. They couldn't keep track of the money. So you have this level of corruption within the prison also, within their system. You know.
So give us some examples of the corruption that you either heard about or witnessed yourself.
Well, one one big one was this arrogant. So we were under the medical section. The psychology department came under medical, and this arrogant alcoholic chief medical officer for the whole state prison system. He decides that he wants to create a, electronic medical record system for um, the entire state prison. Okay, so he buys the computers first. All right, he got them all stored up, and then he starts working on paying to create the software for them. And then the software got so big it would no longer run on those computers. So he has $1 million worth of computers stacked up in a warehouse there, and now he doesn't have any software to run on it because he's paid these guys a fortune to develop that software, and they will no longer run on these computers. So here's $1 million of taxpayer money just swept under the table, and those computers disappeared. I mean, they could have used them in the programs that I had developed, but no, those they just vanished. You know, so it's very corrupt.
It sounds a lot like
The
politics.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the $100 hammers or whatever it is that people end up, that the taxpayers are paying for. And so of a missing backhoe or bulldozer and
Eh,
all kinds of computers just wasted, sitting in
yeah,
a warehouse.
those were the two big ones. I mean, those were the massive ones, and then they
Well, I would imagine that if these prisoners are doing work for pennies for a corporation, not the state, how is that legal?
well, they had to come up with something that wouldn't um, compete with something in the private sector. Okay, so for a while they were making like bags for pilots, federal pilots, to carry their um, helmets in. So it had to be something to wasn't see because they started doing all this other stuff, and then all these private guys go, "Hey, we can't compete with 75%, 50-cent labor." So they stepped in and they stopped a lot of the programs that they had. But the rehab programs disappeared. They used to have an auto mechanics thing there where they teach them auto
They
mechanics.
teach them
They
stuff,
had they
yeah.
had a farm. They had all these different vocational courses there. So they still had GED while I was there. They had a small college program for some of them, but most of them they didn't have anything for. They would go out and the minimum custody unit would um, send these people out. So they ran the prison with the inmates for the most part. So they had these trustees, and I remember one time when I was working minimum custody, they were ordered they had to go through the psych department when they wanted to employ any seriously mentally ill inmate. Okay,
Wow.
so we'd take a look at him and say, yeah, either this guy could do it, or no, he's too dangerous. Okay, so the warden of that unit just completely ignored that. And then one day I come to work, and I had a pass out for this one inmate who he had murdered his wife with a butcher knife. Okay?
Oh my
And
gosh.
he was psychotic, and he didn't show up. So I'm like, hey, where is this guy? So I went to check, and the warden had assigned him to a job in the kitchen where he was peeling potatoes with a butcher knife.
You can't make this up.
No, you can't make this up. So I found that hard to believe. So I went over to the central kitchen, looked up where he was, and here he is sitting there with this big butcher knife peeling potatoes. And I look at the guard and I said, this guy murdered his wife with one of those. And he's like, because they don't tell the guards anything. So I went to the
Oh
chief
my
medical
gosh.
officer, and I said, listen, this ain't good. So he pulled the guy out of there, and he gave the warden a hard time. And then the warden pulled me in and started giving me this stuff like, oh, you really think he was dangerous? I mean, and I kind of looked at him,
Oh my gosh.
and I just started laughing so hysterically. He was so ridiculous that I fell on the floor in front of him at his feet, and I was just laughing. And what could he do?
Like,
So
how
I was just,
ridiculous is this?
yeah, it was like, I can't believe this. This is just out of it. You know, so he was trying
Man.
to fill his quotas. They have quotas that they have to fill for workers at different places. Um,
And so
You
were
know,
there certain things that worked better? Like while you were talking, you were talking about how they used to have the auto mechanics, they used to have college, they used to have the farm. Like, I don't know, when you were saying it, I started thinking, gosh, the farm thing seems like such a great idea to be outdoors in nature,
yeah,
working with
yeah,
animals. I would think that would be such a great thing to keep going.
yeah, they grew their own food. It was working fine, and then for some reason they stopped it. So as more and more the see that their resources are always almost on an emergency level. Their staffing is always low. Their medical staffing is always low. Their guards are low. The staffing is at minimal levels
Right.
in there. So
Right.
there's a
They're
lot of
trying to
stress for
maximize
working there.
profits or
Well,
not spend as much of the federal money. What
well,
does every prison have a therapist, or I mean, I know they have a medical ward, in case something happens, but do all of them have access if they need
well,
it?
all the ones I know and the ones I worked with in other places have a psych department. So basically, what our deal was to keep track of the inmate population and watch for these guys coming in. So every new guy that came onto the unit that had a mental health history, we'd interview them and see what kind of shape they were in, and then refer them to the psychiatrist. But then when they started this corrupt crap with the chief psychologist cutting off the medicines, and what they did from there, and when he saw what I had written in the medical record, he got hysterical, and he put another psychologist over me to watch every record that I wrote to get their approval. So that had never happened before. And I told him, I said, I'll play your game until another situation like this comes up, and then I'm going to do what I have to do. You do whatever you do, but this is temporary, because one
Mhm.
will come up. And
Yeah. I'll be going somewhere else. And
yeah,
so you went from Georgia, then you went to Arizona prison, and was that where you retired from? Or at least thought you were
yeah.
retiring?
Well, yeah, I bailed out of there because when schizophrenic started recovering, you know, that that wasn't supposed to happen. So when I found out that the voices they were hearing were actual entities and they were running patterns, and I started doing things to interfere with those patterns.
Mhm.
Kind of throwing monkey wrench into the patterns to see what happened. And then the prisoners started coming back and going, the voices don't like that. They don't like what you're doing. You know, and finally we figured out ways to attack the voices, and Sherry came up with her "That's a Lie" program. So 98% of what they tell patients are lies. What
Sure.
they want to do is they want to upset them, and it's only after they upset them that they can take their energy, and that's what they're after. They're after that energy, but it has to be at a low level. So that's why they're constantly negative and abusive and rotten, because they have to bring down the person's energy level to that low vibration, and then they can somehow take it.
They
And how they
siphon
do
it.
that, I have no idea how they do it,
Well, I think
but
they're doing
they
it
do it.
with all kinds of things. I think they're doing it, with anything where they can divide people or, on any subject or through the news or, scaring people with stories or whatever. I do believe there is siphoning going on of some sort.
Now, what I meant, I don't know how they actually siphon it. I don't know how
Yeah,
they do it. But
right.
you're right about the prison was the biggest feeding ground for these negative entities that I've ever been in my life. The state hospital was nowhere as bad as the prison. You walk into the prison door and you could just feel it. It was just, I remember I flew with the Arizona Civil Air Patrol for like 23 years, and I remember there was one morning where we went out on an early flight, and then I came back after flying all over Arizona and the beautiful mountains and seeing everything from there. I had to go back to the prison, which was right near the airport, and going from that into the prison was like a psychic trauma. It was like, oh man, you could really feel it then.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
feel that way walking into hospitals too. Do you get that feeling from a hospital at all?
No, I never got the psych hospitals a little bit, but from a regular hospital,
Mhm.
uh, no. But I watched what they did there too. It was like after I retired from the prison, I went and worked psych crisis for the emergency rooms in the major hospitals
Oh,
around
okay.
town for
I didn't
10
know this
years.
part.
Yeah, 10 years I did that. And here's all these guys coming in. The police are dragging them in. Um, you could see they're heading for prison. And all they do is they'd they didn't in the emergency room. They didn't want you working with anybody. They wanted you determined. The guy goes in, he goes out, or they wanted him out of there as quick as they could get him out. They wanted him out because the doctors have no idea what to do with crazy people. So they turn them over to the psych staff, and then we'd have to figure out: can we send them back to the family? Do we have to send them to a mental health center? Do we have to arrange for a mental health? Whatever it took to get him out of there.
Or did they commit a crime? Because sometimes, there's like, shootouts or whatever, and they end up in where you are. And then once they're healed, then do you talk to them? I mean, is that something that would ever happen?
In the hospital, yeah, there were a lot of suicide
Oh,
things where
okay.
we had to go up and determine whether the guy was suicidal or not. Still suicidal. So the doctor's like, okay, we want to get him out of here, but we can't release him until one of you guys come up and say they're not suicidal anymore. And if you blew one of those, you were fired.
Oh, yeah, I
It's
could
like,
imagine. That would be very stressful. How did you, like, decompress from this type of stuff?
oh, geez. Yeah, it was stressful. I remember there were times I broke out into rashes. Um, I'd jump on a motorcycle and just take off. Um, I did that. The flights with the Civil Air Patrol were nice, to get out and fly around for a while. Um, yeah, and just kind of try to stay. I remember one time I got in a motorcycle accident, and I was so happy my leg was snapped because I didn't have to go back to work at the prison.
Oh my
I mean,
god.
for me, it was like heaven not
So
having to
you
go back
must
there.
feel really free now, now that, like, the work that you're doing is so impactful and you're in demand and people are flying you around the world and paying for your trips. Does it feel good?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like it's opposite. The, there were some of us who knew no good deed will go unpunished in the prison.
Mhm.
You do something good, it's not going to work. Because these negative entities control that place. And Sherry Sweeney, my co-author, she was working with a prison one time. She had a group of uh, kind of people who were kind of meditating and sending positive energy into the prison. Okay. And one night she went to do that, and she said this smoke appeared in her room. Just came out of nowhere, this dark cloud of black smoke, and it
Gives
said
me
to
the
her,
willies.
these people are ours. They're mine. You have no right to be doing this. And yeah, that was pretty spooky.
That is
So
really spooky.
it's like when they said, they're mine. It's kind of
It's like a principality rather than, it's like, okay, here's these people that are afflicted by these entities or these parasites or whatever it is, these voices, but then they're all congregating in this area where there's a lot of criminals with, dark behavior as well. And it's
yeah,
almost like they take over the actual space, the the environment, the
yep,
building, the
yep,
bricks, and this
yep,
is ours.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And I remember one time the voices would tell me, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." You know, I mean, straight out came out of this one prisoner, and he said that wasn't me, that was them. You know, so you look at that, and the prison is just full of anxiety and fear. I mean, they're threatening each other, they're raping each other, they're stabbing each other, they're extorting each other, they're extorting families on the outside. Uh, They're threatening all the time. There's constant fights. There's murders. I mean, this one high custody unit I worked on. You walk in the morning, there's blood all over the sidewalks. You know, um,
I mean,
but
think about
it's
that. That is so satanic almost.
yeah, it's a very negative environment. Very negative environment, and they're constantly. It's like hell on earth. They're constantly testing each other out. What can I get away with? What will this guy stand for? What can I mow him over? Can I extort him? Can I, what can I do? And they're raping each other. They're stabbing each other. I watched this one film where the gangsters wanted this one guy taken care of, and they had a weight pile. So here's this one inmate with the weights are off, and here's this iron bar, and he's kind of got it, and he's swinging it on his shoulders. This other inmate brings the victim, and they're walking along, and then he moves aside, and this guy with the bar just took it and swing it, cracked him in the back of the head with it and killed him. Right on the
Oh my
video.
gosh.
So that kind of stuff going on all the time. People getting stabbed. They had what they called shanks. They'd make homemade knives out of pieces of steel. Um, uh, they get drugs in all different kinds of ways. And if you run into a drug debt and you can't pay it, you're in trouble. Your life is at risk. So there were always people dying in there. I remember one time when I worked for the medical unit, but I wasn't like a nurse or a doctor or anything like that. But the prisoners would come to me when something was seriously wrong, and the regular medical people wouldn't see them. So they were very regimented also. And what I'd do is I'd go out and I'd look at the guy, and if he looked bad to me, I'd go and I'd get the psych nurse, and then I'd take her out there. So there was one guy. He was one of our psych patients. He was on lithium, and in Arizona it gets so hot he sweated out a lot of water, so his lithium level increased to the point where it was toxic. And I went back and got the psych nurse, and I said, Debbie,
Oh,
you probably need to take a look at this guy. So she did, brought him in. He was on his way out. He was dying. So we saved him. And then both of us got called up in front of administration and told that that was none of our business, that we shouldn't have done that.
no good deed goes unpunished, as you say.
Yeah.
But it goes back to the truth set you free. The fact that you are an honest man, you saw the mistakes and the dirty dealings and the corruption. You did the best you could. But when you finally got out and told the truth, your whole life has just kind of opened up and become so incredible and so important. There's so many people that have seen your video. It's at least in my subscriber group, you're among the favorites because people have been so gaslit by
Oh, yeah.
society. And so it's
Yeah.
just it feels so good to have anyone telling you the truth, especially somebody that has credentials, that has encountered the things that you've encountered. And then too, to be able to be honest and say, this is something bigger than this isn't just psychology. This is spiritual attacks. This is
Yeah.
somebody's being attacked by an entity. There's a place and Satan owns it, and there's blood on the sidewalks, and there's a principality claiming power over all these people. And so to me, it goes back to how could you fix it? Is there a way to fix it? To me, I'll tell you, in my opinion, it really is who owns the prisons, who's running the prisons, regardless of the amount of money. If a dirty person that is only in it for the profit or to keep the prices down, they're going to not care anything about what's in there, what goes on there, nothing. Like you said, like a human holding tank.
Yeah.
Whereas if it
And
was, I just imagine like this, like a prison where, there's grandmas on the cameras and they're like, oh wait, that person's being naughty, or, get that one away from there. I feel like it can't be that difficult, but maybe I'm
oh,
naive.
no, yeah, it would be. Yeah, you got it goes up the line just like the demons. They have their levels. So you've got these directors, these prison directors
But that's what I'm
that are
saying, if
given.
good people, not crappy
Yeah,
directors.
well, they want somebody who's going to keep the cost down.
Right, that's my point.
To do whatever they need to keep the cost down.
Yeah.
And some of these guys are just, they were going to charge staff for parking in the parking lot. You know, the raises were virtually non-existent in the prison system. It's always strapped for money. They're like the what do you call it, tail end Charlie of everything else, and they're putting more and more people in there, and you hear on the news, oh, this murderer escaped. He's running loose in the neighborhood. Everybody lock your doors and get your guns out. And here's the mainstream media broadcasting all this bull crap and scaring everybody half to death. What they don't know is they're releasing 25 or 30 of these guys every freaking day. They've done
That
their
doesn't
they've,
make us
they've
feel
done their
better.
they've done their time, and it's
Right.
okay. We can't hold them anymore. They've done their time. They've paid their debt to society. And they're coming out of there in worse shape than what they ever went in. And these psychotics that are already psychologically disturbed, and
Right.
then you put them under that kind of pressure with gangsters and being beat and being fighting and threatening them, they come out in much worse shape. They're much colder, much more calculating. So, prisons are like a graduate school for criminals. They compare things. Hey, how'd you get caught? Well, I got caught this way. Well, yeah, I knew better than not do that. Maybe you won't do that next time. It's like uh, it's nuts. And some of the stories the prisoners told me, especially the meth addicts. You know, they told me, and more than one of them said, when I ran out of meth, the voices would tell me where to go and when to be there to get more meth. And they said they would show up at that spot at the time they were told, and somebody with the meth would come around. Some complete stranger who had meth would show up.
If that doesn't make you believe in vibration, I don't know what does, I had a friend of mine whose son, was addicted to heroin, and she's like, "He literally landed in Miami, and he had a heroin overdose in, like, an hour. How in the world does that happen?" You know?
I've seen them. They get on the phone
It's
and
like
they
they
call
find each
somebody.
other.
They have some kind of secret line or something. I've seen that happen. You know,
It is
and
wild. And so, give us just one more take on, or one more story or something, 'cause I don't wanna take up your whole evening, but just one more story that has to do with
well,
anything that has to do with teaching people about prisons, the teaching the
well,
average person that doesn't know anything about it.
what pops into my mind is what some of the gangsters were doing with the well, there's two stories that come to mind. The gangsters were doing with some of these psychotic inmates that were part of their gang. So what happens is psychotics, when they get upset, they become supernaturally strong. I mean, just it's amazing. I'll tell you a story after this where there's one. But so what they did is they forced this guy off his medications, told him not to take them. And then they started making up these stories about this rival gang, saying, "Hey, see that guy over there, the leader of that gang? He's going to kill you. You better go do something about him." So they'd arm him and use him like human torpedoes. Send him over to stab the leader, and uh, that they would
Like a kamikaze pilot.
kamikazes, yeah. And then there was another time. This was in a more maximum security cell in another prison. Um, the What happened is they were trying to move this one big psychotic guy out of his cell and wanted to move him to another cell. So a couple of guards got to his door and said, "Hey, Joe, cuff up. We're moving you." He goes, "I'm not going anywhere." Hey, cuff up. We need to move you. No, I'm not. I don't want to go anywhere. Yeah. Okay, we're going to get the pepper spray. So they had these quart cans of pepper spray. And the guy said, "I'm not coming out, you bunch of fairies. Come in and get me. You want me?" And so they got the pepper spray. They opened the hatch, and the prisoner was sitting on his bed, and he wrapped his head in a towel, and they just soaked him with pepper spray. It was so bad that it came out of the cell, and they were suffering from it. You know? And he took the towel off, and they said, "Now come on out." He goes, "No, come in and get me, you bunch of fairies, you bunch of just calling them all kinds of names and saying, 'You want me to come in and get me?'" Now, what they could have done was turned off the water, so he had no water, and then not giving him any food. In a couple of days, he would have come out of there, But no. So when this started, you have these 3 cells of prisoners all watching the show down there. So now the guards can't back down because here's all these other prisoners
So
saying,
they
"Hey,
gotta keep their
well,
egos.
yeah, yeah, if we back down, then we lose status." So they had to up the ante. So they went and got these stun guns, these 50,000-volt stun guns, and they'll just knock. I mean, I've seen them knock down the biggest guy just like that. I mean, just boom, they go down. So they went and got one, and they shot this guy with it. And he's standing in the middle of his cell, and he's just quivering. He's just shaking. He's like that, but he's not going down. And
That's
then when
amazing.
yeah, they're almost supernaturally
They
strong.
are they
It's
absolutely are
crazy.
supernatural. That's not normal.
No, that was not normal at all. So they went and got another stun gun. So they had two 50,000-volt stun guns. Each one would have knocked down the biggest prisoner that normally. And here they are alternating. One's discharging while the other one's charging up. They did it 13 times. By then, there's more guards there, and the warden came down, and he said, "Hey, you better stop it. I'm going to get charged with cruel and unusual punishment." 13 times, and this guy still would not go down.
'Cause they were
And
fairies.
they was yeah, he's calling them
Wow.
fairies, calling them all kinds of names, insulting them in any way he could think of. And then he said, "You want me out of there? You come on and get me." None of them were going to do that, not after what they saw. So they told him, "You don't come out of there. We're going to go get the dog." The prisoners were terrified of the dogs because these are trained, expensive attack dogs. I mean, they're trained; they just rip you apart. They were terrified of the dogs. They're more terrified than anything else. Pepper spray, the stun guns. I mean, the dogs were because they really put the hurt to them.
Yeah.
If they resisted, they just tear them to pieces.
Well, dogs have
So,
naturally high frequencies too. That might bother them as well.
well, they got this trained attack dog. They brought him in, and they opened the hatch and said, "Now come on out of there. We're going to sick the dog on you." And he goes, "It's the same stuff. You got to come on in and get me, you bunch of fairies." So they opened the door. They sicked the dog on him. He's sitting on his bed, and the dog leaped at him, and he threw up his arm in front of his face like that, and the dog grabbed onto his arm, just bit right down to the bone.
Oh
So what he
gosh.
did is he pulled the dog up to his face, just like this, and he's looking the dog in the face, and he goes, "Sit," and the dog sat, but it didn't let go of his arm.
See, that's
So
supernatural too.
that's really weird. And then he starts petting the dog like, "Nice puppy," while his arm's gushing blood, and the thing's clamped down to the bone. He's going, "Nice puppy, nice puppy," and everybody outside's going, "What the blazes is going on in there?" So they had a rope on the dog, and they pulled the dog, and the dog kept his mouth on the this prisoner.
Mm.
They pulled him out of the cell, and then they beat the crap out of him.
Oh
You
gosh.
know,
Yeah, I don't know how you survived so many years of that. That is
oh,
just
it was tough.
so
It was tough.
so low vibes,
Yeah,
so scary, such dark entities. You are a
I
miracle.
I never belonged there. There were some guys who belonged there. I didn't. I never belonged there ever. Maybe the first 10 years I did, but after that it was like no. I felt like I was somebody in a spacesuit walking on Mars or something. Yeah,
Well, that's the way a lot of people feel just on being on Earth.
yeah.
It's
And
not
and
it's not exactly a really friendly place to be unless you
and
really know how to maneuver it.
then when they found out the schizophrenics were recovering, which is
Oh, yeah.
something that they didn't believe ever should happen. So they would go off their meds. They didn't need them anymore. So they'd visit with the psychiatrist and they go, "I don't need these anymore." And the psychiatrist, "What do you mean you don't need them anymore?" "Well, I was working with this guy and the voices are gone." So it's like they're wondering, well, what's going on here? What's happening? So
How
uh,
dare you heal these people?
how dare you heal these people? And then when the chief psychologist, the same guy who did he cut off the meds to the medical unit, when he found out about this, I thought he'd be happy, because oh, that saves them meds. They don't have to pay for these expensive meds anymore. The guy's back to normal. He can go live a normal life. Now this didn't happen a lot, because it's a lot of work. It took maybe 6 months to just for these, you know. But eventually, these guys wanted to recover, and they
Right.
recovered. You
That's
know,
awesome.
and so they started this investigation on me. None of the prisoners would tell them what we did in our sessions. They knew what they were doing, and they didn't tell them. So one of them asked him, what's he doing in there? What's he say to you in there? Because sometimes I'd go in there, I'd stay in him with 2 or 3 hours. I'd spend with one guy, and the rest of them, they spend 20 minutes with him. They can't get anything out of him. They let him go. So that looked odd. That got their attention. And then when they started recovering, that really got their attention. And they didn't know what was happening. And I remember the both of them. My direct supervisor and the chief psychologist pacing like demons. It was like they had ants in their pants. It was like something's really wrong here. Something's really wrong here. And it was like they were scared. And I'm like, what's going on with these people? I mean, we got a cure for schizophrenia. I mean, it's working, and they're just pacing like demons, back and forth, back and forth. And
Yeah.
then they put me under investigation, started questioning all these guys I worked with. None of them would give them any answers. So the one psychologist said, "Well, listen, we got a valid MMPI on you when you came into the prison, and you were psychotic then. You were schizophrenic, and now you're telling me you're not. Would you be willing to take another?" He said, "Sure, I'll do that." And then he was asking that guy. He says, "What's Jerry doing with you in there?" And he says, "He's helping us, not like you, asshole." And he could have gone all day without saying that, you know. So that really pissed him off. And they gave him the second MMPI, and it came out as a valid profile and non-psychotic.
Congratulations.
Well, that didn't help me any.
I know, apparently not.
Then they really turned up the heat. They really started questioning these guys, and
Did you ever
they
have a
moved.
philosophy on why? Because I agree with you. Like, as you're telling the story, I was thinking, okay, they would be happy that they're not having to pay for the drugs. Do you think it was just the psychiatrist's ego that he didn't want you to be doing something like that?
Well, it wasn't the psychiatrist, it was the chief psychologist. It was the same guy who was
Oh,
turning
the
guys back from the medical
yes,
unit,
yes, yes.
you
Okay.
know, and he was afraid. He was afraid that, and what they were trying to charge me with was experimenting with prisoners without departmental approval, and
Got it.
I would have never got that.
Right.
So what they did is they knew I was doing something. They moved me to a Spanish unit where my Spanish is really bad.
Mm.
So I really couldn't work with those guys like I could when I was in English. So uh, they were taking over too. I mean, it wasn't like, oh yeah, you're doing something. Like I told you, no good deed goes unpunished in the prison. It's a very dark place. It's being run by negative entities.
Mhm.
All the way
All the
down.
way, yeah.
Um, Usually the wardens are hardcore, and they get it from the top down.
Mhm.
So they're ordered, um, from the top down. They pay them a lot, but boy, that they're then owned by the state. They're the pawns of the state. You
Sure.
get up at 2, 3 in the morning, you get out to the unit and see what's going on out there.
Not good.
Not good.
Were you ever there late at night? Or were you more of a just
Uh,
daytime person?
it was mostly daytime, but I went out there, once in a while at night, not often, just kind of to see what it was like.
Is it way worse?
No, everything's quiet at night. They're all
Oh,
locked down
okay.
in their cells.
Yeah,
They're
'cause
not
everybody's
walking around on
sleeping.
the yard. Yeah, none of that kind of stuff. But they also test the staff to see what they can get away with each staff.
Mhm.
How far they can push them. I remember one time I was coming across the yard. It was like 5 o'clock. There's this big, huge black guy doing something on the, you know, on the path toward to where I needed to leave.
Mhm.
And then he said some kind of slur, at me. You can't let him get away with that.
Right.
So I got pissed off. I went up to him looking at this guy. I mean, he had arms as big as my legs.
Yeah.
And I said, who do you think you are? I'll have you locked down. You don't see the light of day for the next 10 years, buddy. And it's, I don't think he knew who I was, but he saw me stand up to him and he's like, whoa, 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 like
Okay.
that. Then I walked away and I go, what the blazes did I just do? I mean, he could have broken me in half like a stick, but you can't let him get away with you. So there's this constant testing going on, and then you got in the female prisons, man, uh, male staff in female prisons. That's a really tough job. It's a very tough job.
I can't even imagine. Did you have to work the female prisons as well?
I did for a while, but it was more like to go over there and evaluate somebody and then get out. So
Mhm.
I wasn't permanently assigned there.
And so what were the
Um,
differences?
well, the women weren't quite as violent, but they were very cagey. They were very
Manipulative.
seductive. They were
Yeah.
very manipulative. Um, they were much more con artists, very very slippery
Mhm.
uh, kind of things. But I remember one. I was talking to her, and it's story. She said she got locked down for something, and she's in isolation, and they would only open the tray, and she didn't even have any lights in there. They'd open the thing, feed her food, and somebody, I think somebody left her a Bible or something like that, and she was reading it, and she goes, "Okay, if there's a God, uh, I want something." I forgot what she said she wanted, and the next day it came into her cell. So she's like, "Well, could that be real?" And then she goes, "Well, if there's a God, I want a piece of German chocolate cake," which is impossible to get in a prison. I mean,
Right.
just it it,
That's
it
not
just
gonna
doesn't
happen.
exist there.
Right.
So the next day, her hatch pops open, and in comes a piece of German chocolate cake. And she goes, "I knew there was a God then."
Wow.
You know, so I mean, if they would let in different religions. I mean, not like the Jehovah's Witnesses or these
Right.
far out ones,
The
but
really
you know,
intense ones,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, Protestants and Jewish guys and maybe meditation guys and stuff like that. Let them in and let them just work with these people. But you know, I remember the training I went through and or watched the training they were giving these volunteers, and they were telling the volunteers, these people are animals. You can't trust anything they say or do. Never trust them with anything. They're not. It was like the orientation they were given them was like they weren't human beings. They were a different class of animal. You know, and that's what they were putting into the volunteers' head.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because when we would go visit, uh, prisons or detention centers or whatever, and one of the times we had these, leadership, booklets and ethics and morals and stuff like that that we were teaching them, and most of them had never even understood the concept of leadership, which blew my mind, when they started telling them what leadership is, and some of you are leaders, but you're leaders for bad, and, I was kind of amazed that they didn't even have the basics. Because I guess I thought even if you had horrible parents, like, you could see TV shows and you see how, usually the arc is the hero learns a lesson somehow, but they did not understand anything that had to do with good character, good morals, good ethics,
Yeah.
leadership, any of it.
Yep. And then it gets perpetuated generation to generation to generation.
Yeah.
So there were when I left, there were like 3 generations of of this one family that ended up in prison.
Were they
You
in the
know,
same prison, like grandpa, dad, and son?
Not at the same
Not
time,
the
I
same
don't
time,
think,
okay,
but
'cause that would have been
they
wild.
did. It was just generation after generation after generation. They just keep fostering it on, you know. And the probation, they have probation, but those guys are overwhelmed. They don't do a great job, and it takes a lot of time to monitor these guys, and they don't have a whole lot of power, and the power they do have is to send these guys back to prison. So the prisons are so overcrowded now, it's ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. The demons hate Palm 23, Psalm 23. They can't stand it. And 91 too.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I had myself on mute and thought I was talking. I keep trying to make sure I get rid of all the background noise. Thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate seeing you, and I love hearing about the good things that are happening to you after all those years of turmoil and just insanity. You were, like, literally at the gates of hell.
Yeah, yeah. And it felt like it. I'd get up in the morning and I'd tell my wife, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And just force myself to go there. So everybody was staying there for the retirement. If they didn't have a good, nobody would be there.
Right.
And a lot of people just couldn't make it through. And it was interesting. One day I was working in the ERs, and one of the guards I knew from the prison came in, and he was completely broke down. He was completely shot. He left the prison. He took his retirement out. He couldn't succeed outside, and now he had a family and a house and all that stuff, and he just couldn't make it. He was just a mess. So I actually ended up having him admitted, to the psych hospital.
Yeah.
And you know the, the, the turnover is horrendous.
Well,
They
and
can't
it
they
makes
can't
sense.
keep people.
Yeah, it makes sense. It would be very, very difficult. I mean, even just the stories I heard at the juvie prison, I just can't even believe. It's so outrageous to think that kids are being put there that already have problems.
Yeah, they ought to have mace therapists in all those places. That would
Exactly.
solve the problem. But like I said, it's not a high volume thing.
Right. Is it
You know,
expensive therapy?
um, that depends on who's doing it. But I think uh, my teacher says she charges like 250 for a full session, which is
Mhm.
to get rid of everything. You
That's
know,
awesome. That's
everything.
nothing.
So it might take 3 or 4 hours to run a full session.
And does it work on depression and anxiety
Yeah.
and things like that
Yep.
as well?
Yep. It has a hard time with schizophrenia. That uh, there's a gray area there where you kind of, is it the voices or is it a negative identity that these guys have picked up along the line?
Mhm.
So uh, the voices are always interfering. They don't want, so you're running a mace session, and if the voices are there, they don't want the person doing it. So
Sure.
they'll try to interfere, say stuff like, this is stupid, or you don't go there, don't do this. Um, I remember
So
one prisoner, we got rid of the voices, and when they left, he was stunned. It was like he almost fell out of the chair. And he said the silence is deafening because he hadn't heard
aw.
silence in decades.
Yeah.
And he was kind of a mellow schizophrenic. I mean, just very subdued. And he had a job working in motor vehicle, so he's answering the phones for the motor vehicle department.
Mhm.
And they moved me to the Spanish unit, so I couldn't do any good. And I stopped back there one day just to see how he was doing. And I said, "How you doing? The voice is still gone?" He goes, "No, I asked for him to come back because I was lonely." So after six
It's like,
months
you
of
know how
work,
there's some people that have to have a TV on all the time or,
mm,
something they want noise in the house. I love it quiet. But when I was younger, I definitely like I would come home, turn the TV on, whether I was watching it or not. I just wanted the noise or the I don't know, but I've definitely outgrown that. But I could see where they would do that. I mean,
Yeah,
I wouldn't if I were them, but I see why they do it. It's almost like a bad friend is better than no friends kind of a
yeah,
concept.
yeah. And they talk to them. I mean, they have conversations with them. I had conversations with them through the patient. And they're not really nice things. They're
Did they
nasty.
ever say anything funny or ever anything, no,
No,
always predictably mean.
always predictably mean. So you wonder about that. It's like, why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? So the psychiatric mafia is saying, yeah, they're hallucinations. Why aren't they random like all other hallucinations? Why aren't they all over the place? They're consistently negative. They're rotten. They're nasty. They say all kinds of bad stuff about the person and anybody they're with. Why would they react so negatively to church or the Bible or prayers? Why does the 23rd Psalm makes them writhe up like burned worms? I mean, you know, there's like 23 patterns that they run, and those are all on my website.
Yeah,
So
you shared them the last time, well, 2 times ago when you were on, and, if anyone wants to know those, they're on that one and or on his website, and his website's been right here underneath us the whole time. And so, give us just a couple of them. We'll end on a high note, just talking about, being able to recognize some of these things.
oh, you mean the patterns?
Yeah, just give us 5 of them.
Okay, well, I'll give you 5 new ones. They foster and create negative emotion. We talked about that. They energetically drain their victims. They get louder after sunset, and they get loudest
Whoa.
around 3 in the morning. You know, they see psychiatry. They'll tell them, "Oh, just ignore them. They're hallucinations." I went and asked patients how that worked out for them. It didn't. They get louder when they're ignored. They foster self-destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They want the schizophrenic locked in his room, away from everybody else. The parents are evil. They're nasty. They're rotten. Keep away from them. They want them all to themselves, locked in the room, listening to their dribble all day. That's the worst thing a schizophrenic parent could do is let their son or daughter sit in that room listening to those voices all the time. You know, so that what
Better
they're
to
doing is they're slowly moving to take over the person.
right. So it
You know,
goes from
and
oppression to possession.
yeah, and I've the full possession is rare. I've only seen it 2 or 3 times, and it
That'd
was
be
pretty ugly.
scary. That
Yeah,
would be so scary.
yeah, they're not even the same person anymore. So
It's so
I got
sad.
one story where they uh, in the ER, the parent brought the son in, and when the parents called him by his real name, his birth name, he would get furious and he would start throwing things and threaten them and say, you know, Joe Blow is dead. I'm not him. Quit calling me that. You know, and he'd actually get violent when they called him by his right name.
It's so sad. It's so sad. I would be, I mean, devastated if something like that happened to someone I knew. Um, but I definitely do believe there's magic in the biblical thing, and I do
Yeah,
believe it is a spiritual war. And I love that you guys are thinking out of the box and trying to find ways to heal people through, this mace energy method or some of the other ones that you were talking about. So there's still hope out there. And imagine if you could get rid of 25% of the prison population, if everyone could participate in something like that.
well, it's not just getting rid of the voices; it's the frequency. So once the voices are gotten rid of or weakened, that person needs to get on a positive spiritual path and stay there. Otherwise, these things are going to come back. They can't stall out.
Yeah.
They have to start moving toward God or whatever their higher power is, and stay there. Because if they, it's not like when you get an infection and you take an antibiotic and it goes away. You get rid of the voices. You got to keep doing stuff to keep them away. and that means staying on a positive spiritual path and moving toward your creator. You
And
know,
amen, and that's true for everyone.
that's
All
true
of
for
all
everyone,
of us
especially
need to do that.
schizophrenics.
I used to tell the kids that I would work with, imagine that your mind has this happy balloon and you gotta keep it up. You can't let it fall. It will naturally fall. Why is
Yeah,
that? I don't know. I have no idea, but it's true for anyone. And so you have to do things to love yourself so that you actually can keep that balloon in the air.
right. And they have to too. And schizophrenics have to want to get rid of those voices. If they don't, there's nothing you can really
Oh,
do
I
for them.
could imagine. I could
Those
imagine.
drugs don't get rid of anything. They don't cure anything. You know, they don't. They don't. They're most of them are toxic. And these guys
And
are.
killing the brain, like you said earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
Wild.
The autopsy showed that their brains were shrunk up with long-term use. They were shrunken like walnuts. Of course, the psychiatric mafia went nuts. Oh no, it's not. It's the schizophrenia. It's not our medicines.
Is that why
No.
they call them shrinks?
Yeah, yeah. It
They're
could be.
literally shrinking the
Shrink
brain.
you. They literally shrink your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
It is, do those entities like music?
They like that nasty rock music, that acid rock. That's what they like. They
Interesting.
like the rap stuff where they're talking about killing people and murdering people and sexually assaulting people. They like that.
Great
You know,
question, Duke.
they don't like peaceful music. They don't like religious music. They hate the what do they call them? The Gregorian chants, especially the French Gregorian chants. They can't
Hmm,
stand that. That really
it's just
torments them.
beautiful.
Yeah.
They don't like what anything that God created that is beautiful, I guess.
No, they don't like anything beautiful. They don't like you being happy. They want you miserable. They want your energy. They could care less about you, about the person, you
Mhm.
know. And Ouija boards are very dangerous. Meth,
100%
meth,
agree.
meth, and Ouija boards. I've seen so many people go psychotic on meth and Ouija boards. They're playing the Ouija thing and they're talking to this entity. They don't know what it is. Next thing they know, the voice appears in their mind, and now they're gone.
So that was a
You know.
portal. Meth
Yep.
is a portal, that is. What about tarot cards?
I don't know about tarot
You
cards.
never saw that?
I I only had one experience with them, and it came true.
Oh, wow.
So it was like I don't know what to think about tarot cards.
Yeah.
Then you got stuff like the I Ching and I don't know, but the Ouija boards for sure, and the channeling. You never know what you're going to what you're channeling. So these people
100%,
that are
100%.
trying to channel. I mean, one of these days they're going to get stuck with something that they don't like. Because these things are around. They hit all of us. It's not just the schizophrenics. Every negative thought you have about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side.
Mhm.
You know,
Well, and that's why I think, social media is both, it's bittersweet because it can be the most amazing place where you can meet amazing people who are interested in the same things, or, you find someone like you from across the country or the world. But then you can get to where you get on and it's war, war, war,
yeah, yeah. Well,
division, race,
it,
like all this stuff. And it just brings you down, brings you down, brings you down.
well, I'll tell you, if you look at all these patterns that I have here, the 32 of them, you read them. There's a one-to-one correspondence between these negative patterns that the schizophrenic voices are running and what the mainstream media is broadcasting to us right now. It's the same stuff on a macroscopic level.
Yeah.
The fear, the negativity, the anti-religion stuff, the fostering of negative emotion. It's all draining negative stuff. It's the same entities in a
Larger.
macroscopic scale, a larger
Sure.
scale. So this is spiritual battle that we're facing right now on this planet, and a huge one.
Mhm. Yep.
You know,
And that's why I work really hard, and I've learned to detach in really healthy ways so that I can function and be one of the people that raises people up rather than brings people down. Also gifted with just a natural happy demeanor. which is
Mhm.
also lucky. You know,
Yeah, that's
it
good.
offends some people. It kind of like, you know, how you said that they don't like the Bible or whatever. Some people get aggravated with me, but it's just the way it is. Can't make everyone happy.
Yeah, they don't want them to be happy. They don't want them to be content. They don't want them to succeed at anything. They'll sabotage them every chance they get. They warp their reality, their perception of reality. You know, and it's like these things are energetic. You know, it's like if you have a magnet, a strong magnet, you can't see that magnetic field. You can't see it. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. For all practical purposes, it doesn't exist. You can't sense it with your senses.
And that's why
Uh,
it's so hard for people to recognize because they're not conscious of how they feel. And they've been told, "Oh, don't pay attention to your emotions, use your logic."
Yeah,
And
right.
and then you really get, you know, sideswiped because you don't even see it coming because you're not in tune.
Yep. And you know what the psychiatric mafia does? It's you see the magnetic field when you put a jar of iron pilings on it. Now you can see the field. Okay, the field for schizophrenia are these patterns. You know, and what they've done is they've taken them and they've kicked them up. First of all, they've blamed it on mothers to start with. Oh, the mothers did something to cause these people to be schizophrenic. So when they saw the mothers were like, hey, we didn't do anything. I mean, we're victims of this too. You know, so you know it was something you could see. So they took it and they kicked it up into the genetic area. Oh, it's a genetic abnormality. And they got away with that for years, going, oh, yeah, it's something wrong with the genes. Just, the only thing you could do is take these toxic medicines for it. You know, and then some of the geneticists finally got around to looking at it. They couldn't find any genetic schizophrenia gene. You know, so they knocked that out. So they had to keep something where people couldn't see the result themselves. You know, who's going to? You need a geneticist to understand that stuff. So they kick it up in an area where the victims don't understand what's going on. So they say, well, this is the cause, and there's nothing you can do about it. So
Yeah.
then they took it when the geneticist said, hey, we don't find a schizophrenia gene. So then they start this biochemical imbalance nonsense, complete lie, and the universities are teaching it. You know, so here's all these psychologists and psychiatrists coming out brainwashed that mental illness is due to a biochemical imbalance. You know, and the
Yeah.
mace method is showing that it's not. You know that these things can be gotten rid of, and they can be gotten rid of permanently. There's a way to do it, and it just goes on and on. It's just a big merry-go-round. You keep drugging these people. They go off their drugs. They put them in the hospital. They charge them $10,000 or whatever for a week. Their
Mhm.
insurance runs out. They put them back on the drugs, kick them out again, and 6 months later they're back again, and the whole cycle. So it's like a giant money fleecing machine, and
Mhm.
nobody's getting any better.
Mhm.
You know, these drugs don't cure anything, nothing.
Are you mostly working with schizophrenics or do you do everything, you know?
Well, I do everything, and
Okay.
it's schizophrenics are hard.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of times we don't completely get rid of the voices, but we get rid of the stuff that the voices feed off of.
Right.
So they're weakened, and then if the person is really serious about getting rid of them, we can give them things to do that will weaken them further.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so the food that they feed off of, because you know they can go into the schizophrenic's mind and see every rotten thing they've ever done because they're energetic. So, you know, treating them with drugs is like pouring Thorazine or Risperdal on a magnetic field. You know, these things are energetic. They're not physical. Physical drugs do not affect them. They affect the brain. They'll
Sure.
sedate the person so they're like zombies. They're still hearing the voices though. You know, they're just not as upset about it. Now the voices
Man.
don't like those drugs because they don't want the person sedated. They want him upset so they can feed off him. You know,
Yes.
so that's one of the reasons psychiatrists get attacked by schizophrenics at a higher rate than any other
Sure.
doctor.
Yeah.
You know,
One of the
what they
benefits, I guess, of Zoom nowadays, I mean, I don't know, do they meet on Zoom?
I they didn't have Zoom at when I was working. They had closed circuit television that they wanted us to cover
Jeez.
different ERs with. They had that, but
Right.
they didn't have Zoom. Usually we were right there in the population.
Oh, okay.
And the state hospital was like being in a sea of insanity. But I think one of the things that saved me is I was an adrenaline junkie. you know, that helped a lot.
Well, you get whoa, that was wild. It's a
Yeah,
crazy story. So you get a dopamine hit, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah, it's nuts. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing with us. If people want to find Jerry's list of 32 now, you have added some more.
yeah. They can
Um,
go to jerrymarzinsky.com under articles,
okay.
and it'll be there. Also is
What's the
what's there
title
is
of the article?
uh,
Do you
well,
remember?
it's I think it's something to do with patterns.
Okay.
I forgot what it was, but there's
Okay.
another one there that would help schizophrenics that Sherry Sweeney came up with, and it's how she got rid of them, and it's called the "That's a Lie" program,
Yes.
because 98% of what they tell the patient are lies.
Right.
So if you respond back to them, "That's a lie." They can't get you. They have to get you to believe what they're saying in order to
Yeah.
get control of you.
Yeah.
And if
I
you
worked
don't
with
believe what they're saying, they can't get you.
100%. I worked with Byron Katie, who has written all kinds of books, and she's nationally known, and she's just fascinating woman. And she has a similar concept. Now, it wasn't for schizophrenics, it was just for basic self-help. But she doesn't say that's a lie. She says, is it true? And you ask yourself, is that really true? Because a lot of times, all of the stuff that we say about ourselves, it's just a thought that came in, and why are we buying that? And
Yeah,
it's
and you have
very
to ask
similar.
yourself, where does that thought come from? Does that come from you? Are you leveling these thoughts against yourself? No, those thoughts are coming in from the outside, from the dark spot, from the dark side.
Yeah. Have you ever
You
heard
know,
of archaics?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so there's this guy on YouTube who I just discovered through somebody on Twitter. He was an actual prisoner, but he was like this nerd prisoner, and apparently he ran the thing because he wanted to study, and he literally spent 27 years or whatever studying like all these crazy calendars. He went back in, BC, all kinds of anything that he could find information on, all the oldest books he could find. He was, trading this stuff around through the libraries and stuff. But he has this whole theory about this simulation and how we're kind of in this AI
Mm-hmm.
unknown thing, and that these things are being pushed at us, and that we can overcome it through one thing, and that is not being afraid. And it's wild to
Yes.
me because that is biblical. That is absolutely biblical. Like what
Yeah.
he is teaching in different words is, God is everywhere. He is the field, but that Satan has power over the earth, and
Yep.
he's the prince of the air, right? The airwaves. And I just think you might find him interesting just because
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, because that's what these voices want the person to experience is fear.
yeah, yeah,
You know. Now, anybody who wants to learn about how we came to these conclusions can get this book. It's on
yep, you can
Amazon.
see it.
Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind. That's how we came to these the conclusions we have, that these voices that schizophrenics are hearing are not hallucinations.
And so Sherry was your co-author on
Sherry
that.
Sherry was my co-author. She heard voices when she was a young woman, and they almost killed her. So we worked together on this, and it was 10 years I knew her before she told me she was hearing voices, or she had heard voices. And I couldn't believe it, because she's one of the most spiritual people I know. And so I started whacking her with questions that only somebody who heard voices
Would
could
know.
answer.
Yeah,
And she was like, bam, 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 right, boom, boom. Then after a while, we went, well, we got to tell the world about this. I mean, they have to know. So
right.
we decided to do this, work together and put this information out, because the psychiatric mafia and big pharma, it's like,
Such a
you know,
stranglehold on people.
oh, shoot. Yeah. And they have lots of money. It's like David and Goliath. It's like, uh,
Do you guys sell it on Amazon or just on your
yeah.
website?
No, it's on
Okay.
Amazon and it's on the website.
Okay,
both
I'll
places.
find the link for both, and I'll put that under in the description box as well.
Well,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, and tell your wife thank you too for sharing you. It was very nice of her
No
on
problem.
Sunday night. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no
Thanks
problem.
everybody. I hope you have a good Sunday night, what's left of it.